pharmaceutical and health sector before he joined Ernst& Young as a business advisor. So all this while he was studying mythology, sacred stories, rituals, symbols, and their impact on our cultures. So currently, while he works as Chief Belief Officer of Future Group, the parent company for Big Bazaar and Pantaloon, biggest retail chain in India now, he is also a leadership consultant for many organizations. He writes extensively. He has written more than 25 books. And he's a story consultant for Star TV. A couple of his TV shows are also very popular. Some of the names I know are CNBC Awaaz and CNBC Mahabharat now. Is that in CNBC?
CNBC is the channel.
CNBC is the channel, yeah. So, well, I can keep talking about his achievements, but I have to now stop and give him an opportunity to come here and take over from here. Please help me welcome Dr. Pattanaik.
How much time do I have?
You have here until 1:15.
With Q&A as well, 1 o'clock. Can you hear me? Yeah? Okay. So, although I do a lot of work on leadership and I work with a lot of organizations, both Indian and international, I prefer calling myself a mythologist. So that creates a lot of buzz in the room. Yeah? Like I'll tell you something about how this designation Chief Belief Officer came about. Let me clarify what it means. Since you all are doing your MBA courses, I don't have a KRA. I don't have a KPI. I just have a payslip. So I'm not expected to do anything. But it's one of those job designations that we created because we just wanted to, the idea was if you give the visiting card to someone in the flight and travel a lot, they should call me for conferences. And that's what happens. People ask me to conference and ask me, what do you do? And in the process, I provoke them to think about things that perhaps they've never heard, things that are necessary, especially in the next 10 or 20 years. The word diversity is going to become very important. And while it is being used casually in institutes, and I've read a lot of literature on diversity, I feel it's to be at one level very superficial, at another level rather pedestrian. Because people really don't understand what diversity means and how complex the issues are. And many of you all will be working, you may work in America, but your clients may not be from America, your team will not be from America. You will have people working from Korea, from Indonesia, from Japan, from Nigeria, Latin America. You don't know where your customer is, you don't know where your vendor is, you don't know, that's the world of the internet. And everything is changing in this world. You're going to deal with people with names you can't pronounce. You will have investors from different parts of the world. You will have customers, clients from different parts of the world. And it makes sense in the world of business to understand what diversity actually means. And if you appreciate it truly, it will help in understanding leadership. So that's where we are. So let me tell you something about my work before that. So, does this work? So, do you want to sort of lower, can you see this clearly? Is it clear to you? Yeah. So these are some of the books I have written. So at the extreme over there you will find children's books which were written. All are mythological books. So these are pure mythology, just storytelling. Because most people in India don't know the stories, or they know the stories. They know it in a very childish way and they don't know the intricacies of the narrative, which are rather sophisticated in structure. So I try to write it in a simple way so that people can access to this very, very subtle concepts. But finally I wrote this book called Business Sutra, which is basically applying the principles over here to management. I'll tell you when it came about. If I did a research, I got some research students to work on it, and I said, tell me who were the top 100 management books, who are the writers of the top 100 management books. And this is what we discovered. Most of them were men. Most of them were men from Europe or America. So the question before us is this culturally influenced? So what you're reading today as management, whether it's a Peter Drucker, whether it's Stephen Covey, whether it's Philip Kotler, they come from a cultural background. Does that cultural background manifest in their writing? And now people have started working on this in early stages. Imagine if all the professors, all the books were written only by Japanese. Would the principles be different? What if all the management books were written by Arabs? Would the principles be different? What if it was written all by people from Africa? Would the principles be different? This is the hypothesis with which I came. And I realized that yes, perhaps we are influenced, because if you look at the history of management, it begins, early stages were industrial engineering, and you realize the principles there. The world's first corporation, as we know it, was the East India Company. And we know what the East India Company did. Yeah? I don't know how many of you all know, they raised capital by selling opium to China, which was raised in India, which led to addiction in China and drought in India. It was the first corporation. It's influenced by, at one level, by the Jesuit missionary activities. Jesuit missionaries followed a very strict principles of management. You don't realize measuring things really began with Jesuit missionaries. They introduced some of the early principles of management. And before that, it was the Roman army. For example, do you all know that the word salary, where does it come from?
Slave.
No, it comes from salarium, which was the amount of salt given to each Roman soldier. It was rationed out. So salarium. So that's how the root is. It's the Roman army, Jesuit missionaries. So it's frankly European and then American. Of course, what we know today is American. Because MBA as a course started in Harvard in the 1920s and really took off because of Peter Drucker and his writings on institutional model of management. Really, that's what we do today. But that's aside. So I said, hey, let's figure out if there is something particularly Indian. Let's try to understand. And in the course of it, I started using the principles of mythology. People said, why are you using mythology? And so let's understand this. Why am I using the mythology for management? And for that, I'll take you on a little bit of a journey, because when you use the word mythology, what are the words that come to your head? You think of, how many of you all have read Percy Jackson? Yeah, thank God, somebody was a kid. But Percy Jackson, you think of gods, goddesses, and say, how can that's fantasy, that can't be, how can that be related to something as realistic as management? So it comes from our understanding of definitions. And the first thing to understand when you study diversity is to appreciate definitions. So let's look at a little exercise. Look at this. 9/11. What does it mean? 9th of November or September 11th? What does it mean?
Depends where we come from.
Depends where we come from. I was raised where I was told first you write the day, then you write the month, then you write a year. So when everybody said 9/11, I thought it was 9th of November. Until the newspaper started talking about this horrific incident that took place, and I realized they were talking about 11th of September. And I said, why are they using different languages? And then you realize, in some parts of the world, you first write the month, then the day, and then the year. So date is not as logical and as obvious as we would like to think. It is changes with geography. So first we have to clarify which dating system. DD, MMYY or MMDDYY. The British or European way or the American way. You have to clarify. And only then the number 9/11 makes sense. But we use it so casually, 9/11, and we assume the whole world will understand it to be 11th of September. When the reality is, many parts of the world, the children will read it as 9th of November. So words have different meanings in different geographies. What about this? The word gay. Does it mean happy or does it mean homosexual? In the 1900s, You would say he's a gay man and a gay woman, and people would mean it's a happy man and a happy woman. Try doing that in the 21st century. You'll have embarrassed looks and stares and glares if I start saying, he's a gay man or a gay woman, and people will get really upset because the meaning has changed over time. So you have to clarify the word comes from which period. In the same way, the word myth has different meanings over space and time. Myth, for me, has different meanings. I use the word to mean belief. What do I mean by belief? So typically I realize in many parts of the world, the moment you use the word belief, they think religion. While I see it as assumptions. You make a business plan, you have a set of assumptions, and you have a business case. Change the assumption and the business case changes. Every human being has a set of assumptions about life. But what is right, what is wrong, what is ethical, what is unethical, what is moral, what is not moral, what is good, what is bad. Every human being has certain assumptions. There are about 50 people in this room. There are 50 sets of assumptions. There are 7 billion people in this planet. There are 7 billion assumptions about life. What is right, what is good, what is proper, what is beautiful. What is beautiful in Nigeria is perhaps not beautiful in Delhi. What is beautiful in Delhi is perhaps not beautiful in Beijing. What's beautiful in Mongolia may not be beautiful in Africa. So notions change across time and space. So for me, myth / belief / assumption is subjective truth. Your truth and my truth. So if I'm talking to you, let's say we meet at Starbucks and we have a coffee in front of us. And we want to chat, spend about an hour chatting with us. What should I focus on? Should I focus on your truth? Should you focus on my truth? Or should both of us focus on the truth that nobody else really knows? And often in conversation, I claim that my truth is the truth and your truth is not the truth. And that's where conflict starts. Arguments start. When in fact, we only have access to our subjective realities. My truth, your truth, his truth, her truth. And then you sort of explore each other's truth. For me, that is myth. And it gives me access to the world of diversity. So if I'm meeting a business partner, the first thing I do is, what is his truth? And I figure him out, and therefore I'm able to talk to him in a better way and establish a relationship. Be it a professional or personal relationship, I don't really make a difference. But so that we can work well together, because I see you, I see your truth, and you see me. And then we can, otherwise, what is happening in modern management is everything is about target orientation and task orientation, and very little human orientation. And that's a serious problem. It's causing a lot of issues in many, especially large companies where you have 100,000 employees, 200,000 employees, where you're reduced to an employee code and you're just a number on an Excel sheet. But you're a human, living, breathing human being sitting in that call center in Bangalore talking to someone in Dakota. And all these are having huge HR issues and financial issues, and they're having issues at so many levels, and people are now questioning these principles, and they're arguing, is this target orientation the right way, or it is never going to go away? And task orientation is never going to go away, but are we adequately focusing on talent? And by talent, I mean human beings. You are talent, you're a person. Should I see you as a set of skills, or should I see you as a human being with emotions and feelings and intelligence and prejudices and biases? How should I look at you? And these are the questions that come to mind, and this myth is a simple tool to address these things, to understand these things. Let me use a metaphor to help you understand myth / belief / assumption better. And the metaphor I will use is the Rangoli. This is a very traditional pattern that you see in South Indian homes. Anybody from the southern part of India? Oh, quite a bit. So you are familiar with what this is. This is a column in Chennai. It's called a Rangoli in the western part of India. It's essentially an art created by women. It's a women's art, not a man's art. It's a women's art. It's created outside the house every day. So just as you brush your teeth every day, you're supposed to do a column to freshen up the house, to revitalize the house every day. Of course, nowadays everybody wants plastic. Just put a plastic there. But traditionally they would do it every day. These were agricultural families and they do it every day. What is it exactly? Observe this carefully and you'll understand the human mind. It's essentially a set of dots, a grid of dots. And you are supposed to take a single line and include all the dots to create a radially symmetrical pattern. So it's not a random joining of dots. It's a design, which is you include all the dots to create a radially symmetrical pattern. Our mind is something like a column. Our mind, every day we receive a set of data points, we receive a lot of data. The data comes to us. You receive it, you store it, and that's the dot. How do you make sense of all the data and information that you're exposed to since childhood? You try to connect the dots and create some coherent pattern in your mind. That's your belief system. That's your assumption. That's your myth. That's your subjective truth that helps you make sense of life, that makes you sense of people. That's what we do. That's how our mind is designed. Now, if I increase the number of data points, in other words, if I increase the number of dots, what will happen? You'll have something like this. Look at this. It is done in a couple of minutes. Okay, this is not like a whole day affair. This would have been done in 20-25 minutes. She's quickly joined more dots, complex patterns. Now, either she's intuitively brilliant or over the years she's experienced to handle larger dots. And that's the truth about you, right? 10 years ago you could handle a set of information. 10 years now, hence, you will handle more information and what we call you become perhaps more worldly wise. You can join the dots differently. You can understand things differently, which means your belief is changing. It's not static. It's changing. The patterns are becoming more and more elaborate. Right? And then you realize that the same dots can be joined differently on different days. Like this lady over here, who joins the dots so differently. The same set of dots are joined differently on different days. So what makes sense in one way on day one makes sense differently on second day. And as you keep doing it again and again, and remember you're doing it every day, you start realizing that other people join the dots very differently. That your column is different. It is beautiful. Your column is beautifully radially symmetrical, but so is the other person's. But it is so different from yours. And you discover that as many people in the room, so many columns, and there's so much to learn from other people's columns. A new way of joining the dots. New dots perhaps. And that gives you appreciation of human beings, that everybody is not a full-time equivalent. Everybody is not just a set of skills, but we are all thinking and looking at the same problem very differently. And eventually you realize that the diversity of patterns, this is the street of Mylapore in Chennai. And look at the women created, these are ordinary women who are nothing spectacular artists, they are not Picassos. But they've created this wonderful art on the street, each one individually using a set of. And this room is something like that, different columns, each one pretty. Do we appreciate every pattern? Now what happens, it becomes humanly impossible to know each and every pattern. So we create clusters. So we say there's an Indian column, there is a Chinese column, there is a Korean column, there is a European column, there's an American column. We try to cluster how people think. In order to just, you could call it, at worst it is stereotyping. At best it is creating certain templates to understand how different people think. So the Chinese think like this, the Indians think like that. It just enables you to negotiate through life a little better, through organizations a little better. So you look at organizations through these various columns, right? So how do I get to understand your column? If I meet you, how do I know what is your column? And there's very three ways only. If I meet you, so tomorrow you're going to go to an interview, you're going to talk to a CEO of a company. How do you figure figure out their column? How do they figure out your column? We know the column exists, that there is this mind map in your head. You want to call this a mind map? Call it a mind map. It exists, and you're saying, hey, how do I sort of figure it out? It's simple. There are only 3 ways: stories, symbols, rituals. Just 3 ways in which you can do it. So imagine you meet someone. Have you met someone like in your, I'm sure you have, either in your personal or professional lives, who's constantly complaining? Have you met people like that? Yeah? I hope it's not your wife. Like, India is so much better, America is so horrible, or this coffee is so horrible, my mother's coffee is so much better, and you go on complaining, oh, these clothes are so terrible, my shoes are terrible, my car is terrible, my work is terrible. They're constantly complaining. And if you hear it repeatedly, you suddenly discover their column. You want to be friends with them? You do not say that you are wrong, life is wonderful. They'll hate you. You want to be friends with them? You must agree with them. Yes, everything is horrible. And they'll say, yes, finally I've met a soulmate who agrees with me. What you're doing is you're acknowledging that column. That column is there. It doesn't mean you have to say that your column is the same thing. You're just seeing their column. And you're saying it's okay for you to have that column. Or somebody has symbols. The kind of clothes you wear. Somebody always wears black. Somebody always wears white. Somebody always has facial hair. Somebody does not have facial hair. Somebody, the cell phones you have, the mobiles you have, the branded clothes you wear, everything is a symbol that reveals something about who you are. Some people like to wear colorful things. Or the rituals. What are the rituals you follow? Some people are always on time. Some people are never on time. And they're revealing through these repetitive actions of theirs, if you observe carefully, their column. And if I appreciate columns, relationship, something will happen to that relationship. Something will definitely happen. So what I'm going to do now in the next 6 slides is show you 3 sets of images to show you columns, how to see columns. Of course, I'm not talking about human beings now, I'm going to talk about culture. So I'm not going to talk about individuals, I'm going to talk about culture, and I'll see what you see. So try, the difficult thing I'm going to ask you is don't judge. Just see, just watch, and see what happens to your mind, and observe yourself observing this. That's the exciting thing. Observe yourself observing this. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to expand our mind column by seeing these slides. So first slide. This is a cemetery. These are tombstones. So people have died, they've been buried here, and to mark their life and their death, there is a stone on which it is carved, their name is carved, the date of birth, the date of death, and their family, something about their family, something is written, and there's a permanent marker of their bodies. So even 10 years from after they died, you can actually go to the spot where they were buried. And you can go there. And if you want to pay your respects, you can pay your respects. And 100 years from today, it will be there. Unless someone vandalizes it. But it's there. So if I see the Egyptian pyramids, I know that it was built by, there was a person inside that. And his life mattered so much that they built a tomb that big. That life mattered so much. And then I see this. Another culture where the dead are cremated and the ashes thrown in the river. No permanent markers. Nothing. You have no trace of this person after he dies. No relic, nothing. It's gone. Completely erased. Do you see a different column? Column A, column B. What does it say? So let's go to something, I'm sorry to begin with something so morbid. Yeah, at lunchtime almost. So we shall go to something slightly more delightful. So we come to a formal meal. So imagine your meal, next meal is going to be served like this, right? Who is organizing the lunch? So you have a 4-course meal. This is, you know it because there's complete transparency. 4 pieces of cutlery, soup, then starter, then main course, then dessert. Sequential. Until you finish the soup, you will not get the starter. Until you finish the starter, you won't get the main course. Until you finish the main course, you won't get the dessert. For each course, you have to take instruments from the outside to the inside. Anyone has seen the film Pretty Woman? Yeah? So that's a scene which talks about this. It's very formal, polished, very posh. Right? So look at it carefully. Look at the column. It's sequential. It's categorized. The boundaries are fixed. It's centrally controlled. All of us will taste the same soup, the same starter, the same main course, the same dessert. We can garnish it with salt and pepper, but essentially we'll taste the same thing. This is an Indian thali. All things served simultaneously. Soup, starter, main course, dessert. You can start with the dessert. It's okay. You can take the starter and dip it in the soup. It's allowed. So long as you use the right hand. Yeah, that's the only condition. And what you do, each one in this room will get the same thali, but everybody will mix and match the food in different proportions. So what you actually eat is highly customized. So the person who prepared the food doesn't know what you've eaten because you've prepared your own dish. So it's the ultimate user experience. No? Because nobody knows. One of you all will take rice and dal, the second person will take pickle, the third person will add papad to it, the fourth person will add gulab jamun to it. 4 different dishes created in the center of the plate and you eat it. So you've customized it so much. Ultimate in customization. So it's simultaneous, no categories, no boundaries, no central control. Different way of eating. Now if you ask from a logical and objective point of view, people will say food has to be hygienic, food has to be nutritious, food has to be served on time. But how should food be served? What is the best way to serve? This way or this way? And there will be cultural divides. In fact, if you get a Chinese gentleman, he will say this is not the way to eat food. You don't keep weapons on the table. And in China, it's considered bad manners if the vegetables and meat is not cut in small sizes so they can put it in the mouth. You're not supposed to use a knife on the table. And they'll say the right way. They'll say this is not the right way to eat. And this is certainly not the right way to eat. You don't know where your hand has been. So the best way to eat, according to the Chinese, would be the chopsticks. Third column. Now let's look at something else. This is a US dollar bill. United States is a diverse, multicultural society. People from all over the world inhabit this country. How many languages of the currency note? One. There is also Latin somewhere, but one. This is the Indian currency note. How many languages?
22.
Come on.
22.
13.
See this, you don't even know it. Those people in India, you take it for granted, right?
16. 15.
Let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16,
Oh.
17. That's Marathi, by the way. That's not Hindi over there. It's different languages. And by the way, there's also Braille in both the currencies, really. But there is Braille. So somebody has not forgotten the blind people, the designer, whoever. But what am I saying? Suddenly you see so many languages, and then suddenly say, different column? So now I'll put all of them together, next to each other. Compare and contrast. Do you see a pattern? What do you see? Tell me. That's A and that's B. Let's not be biased by the culture it belongs to. Think of yourself as Martians. You come to Earth and you see these patterns. So, I know it's very difficult. You will be judgmental. Resist. And look at left and look at right and tell me what are the patterns that you can see. Come on. It's supposed to be, yeah.
On the left, it's more about order and structure,
Okay.
regularity.
So more order, more structure, more regularity. Okay. Yes.
Much more accommodative on the right.
Much more accommodative on the right. Okay. Yes.
I think it's more discreet and more commingled.
Okay, more discreet, more commingled. Anything else?
I see more accommodative on the left.
Okay, you see more accommodative on the left, on this side. Okay. What else?
And one part is permanence versus like the topmost thing kind of gives me the feeling that okay, the body is temporary, like it just keeps going and
Okay,
coming back.
okay.
So there's
So there's a
temporary
permanence over here, you're seeing an impermanence idea over here. Okay, anything else? Okay, so broadly this is what you see. And remember, it's not an exact science because it's highly subjective, it's highly speculative. But broadly, on one side, you see a culture which believes you live only once and therefore your life is precious, the body is precious. On the other side, you believe a culture which believes you live many lives and therefore this is just one of the many bodies you're going to have. So why do you bother? You know, next life will be better, you'll be taller in your next life. So let's get rid of it. You know, you'll have a six-pack ab. Fade in this. Yeah, look at the meal. One user experience, clear, defined, everybody's equal and everybody gets the same user experience. The other one, everybody's unequal because you decide what user experience you want. And then you have on one side one language and many languages. This is far more, a little bit more routine. So now, look at this. And now, just looking at this pattern, compare and contrast this. So that's a street from North Korea, South Korea, sorry. And this is from Hyderabad. Now tell me. Compare and contrast. You're still Martians. And you know, yeah,
No difference.
Logical and fuzzy.
same thing. You see the same pattern coming. And yet, whether we like it or not, we would like to judge it, no? It's instinctive, right? Right, wrong. That column is right, this column is wrong. We instinctively have decided. It's just so, we're so conditioned. We will judge. We do not want to understand. One way, another way. No. This is the right way. It is disturbing when you go to this place because why is it disturbing? It's only disturbing because you're conditioned to believe this column is right and this column is not right. It's conditioning. So what I'm going to do is take you through 7 slides more, the same slides, and show you 7 ways of reading the same 2 slides. How I can read this in different ways, and just let me see what happens to you. Just look at the choice of words, the language. Some of them are highly manipulative. Let me see whether you can catch it. One way of looking at it. One is diverse, the other is efficient.
The different scales. You're using 2 different scales to measure the same.
Absolutely, that's what I'm doing. What does it also mean? If it is diverse, will it be efficient?
Not necessarily.
You have to compromise on efficiency when you want a diversity. They may both be effective. I'm not talking about the result. I'm talking about resource allocation. Yeah.
We may have to define what is efficiency.
Resource allocation. Efficiency is about resources, effectiveness is about results. That's a simple way of understanding. There are complicated definitions, but for that you have MBA professors. Simple definition is resource allocation versus result allocation. Now, if all of us spoke different languages, the speed with which I would have to communicate would have been compromised. The fact that I speak in English and you understand in English enables me to communicate very fast. But the moment you have diversity, let's say there's a group of people who speak only Arabic in this room, I will need a translator. And I have only 45 minutes to finish the lecture. It is going to compromise on something. Somewhere something has to go, right? Imagine now I add a Spanish group. It gets more complex because I've given lectures to people who only spoke French. It was extremely tedious. And I was trained because I would go very slowly. And I knew they were above average. They were from, École Internationale or something like that. So they were really good. And I was talking to them as I was talking to children. And that was not fair but the problem is language was such a huge issue. And I needed a translator to explain complex ideas. Efficiency went down. Effectiveness, they got the idea. But it took more time. Something to think about. Second way of looking at it. Enforcement of one way, empathy for other ways.
I see empathy on both sides, in fact more on the left.
How?
By providing order.
If a cow comes here, it will be, what will happen to the bullock cart?
You probably have a separate lane for it.
That's not in my lane, that's not empathy. That's not empathy. I think the definition of empathy is wrong. Empathy is when it allows to my lane.
It's
Allow in my lane, it's okay. Let a bullock cart come, it's okay. Person is coming from the other side, he's not going to be punished, it's okay. We'll adjust.
Well,
That's, what you're saying is tolerance, not empathy.
what
Empathy
if
and
you
tolerance
know-
are different.
What if you know that if the cow is going to get hit in your lane? You'll still
Stop. You allow it to cross.
But that's not what happens.
Well, it does. Well, I have been living there for a long time. I haven't seen a cow being run over. Maybe you have. So your data points are different, my data points are different. But I do know that I reach office 1 hour late. And I can't plan my journey that you can't have like 30 minutes I'm going to reach it as you do it in the US. I will reach eventually. But I will reach. Third way. Rule submission and rule averse. Sheep and goat. I don't know how many of you all understand the word bhed. Everybody is like sheep versus goat. Now, is that good or bad? I don't know, but I'm just saying. Another way of looking at it, exclusive, inclusive. See how the words, with each word, judgment is also coming. That's a problem. Whether you like it or not, you are going to judge. Judgment is going to come. Doesn't allow you to understand because you want to judge, you want to quickly judge, you want to go fast, you want to judge. That's the way your mind is designed. Fifth way of looking at it, central control versus peripheral control. Sixth way of looking at it, my column is right, your column is also right. But is that okay? And you're like, yeah, it sounds politically correct, but I don't want that. This is so much more better. Another way, this is how economists will look at it. Resource rich, homogeneous. Crowded, poor, heterogeneous. India has double the population of Europe in 1/3 the land with 1/4 of the wealth. Can the rules of Europe apply to India? But yet we want to standardize the whole world because we don't see these parts, these things. Singapore has a population of 5 million. Singapore, beautiful city, 5 million people, 80% Han Chinese. India has a population of 1,200 million people, with less than 40% speak the same language. And the remaining 60% speak 15 different languages. You think it will affect the social structures? Another way of looking at it. So what happens really is judgment is very natural to us. And why is it difficult not to judge? And this is, I just spoke at the Mayo Clinic, and this lovely lady from Korea made a very powerful comment. She said it's so easy to say don't judge. But the fact is, the moment I have to not judge, it means I have to accept that my beliefs are perhaps not correct. And there are other beliefs which are equally correct. They may not be wrong, but equally correct. And that demands a lot of me. She was raised in Korea and she said, I was told I was punished for behaving in an inappropriate way. And when I came to America, I realized people were being rewarded for doing exactly what I was punished for. And it was very difficult for me not to judge. We all judge. It's natural to us. My column is always better than your column. The boss's column is always right. The shareholders' column is perfect. And that's what is happening in the world today. We are looking, when we're talking about We are not looking at each other's column. We are not looking at each other's designs. And so next time you see something which surprises you, remember one of these two stories. On one side is a Greek story of Bellerophon. Bellerophon one day met a monster called the Chimera that was neither a goat, nor a serpent, nor a lion. It did not make sense. Bellerophon killed it and neatly categorized and organized it. On the other side is a folklore from Orissa, India, which talks of Arjun one day meeting a strange animal which was part rooster, part peacock, part elephant, lion, tiger, bull, serpent, human. He put down his bow and bowed to it because realizing that this monster cannot be conquered. It has to be understood. And this is what is going to happen to you in your careers. As you travel across the world, deal with people from different parts of the world, challenges from all kinds of weird challenges out there. You will face monsters that don't make sense to you. You have the option of being Bellerophon, control, organize, cut it into what I think is the right way, or understand it in its way. Something will shift in you, in your decision-making processes, in your effectiveness, in your efficiency, and you'll create a column that I'm sure that's what I call leadership. The ability to include other people's columns. That for me is leadership. Can I include? Very difficult because it comes at a price. It will be a cost. It doesn't come free. Can you do that? And that's the next 20, 30 years. This is going to be the world's biggest challenge. If you appreciate this, and I'm sure something will happen in your careers, mostly positive things. Thank you. So we have time for questions. I think it's 10 minutes. Do we?
We can have another 10 minutes.
Good question. I would say 5 to 7 minutes. Yeah, it's already going 10.
Oh, that clock is not the end.
That's their column. My column is
We have about 10 minutes, I think.
Yeah.
Yes, another we get out of here.
Please don't be under pressure to ask questions.
This is not under pressure, by the way. So you asked us to not be judgmental and also acknowledge that it's hard to not be judgmental. So maybe I'm being judgmental. The slides, the 7 slides that you showed comparing the traffic state, I was almost trying to understand whether you're trying to relate the state of the cars on left and right to the culture behind it, or do you limit it just to the state of the current administration? Because I go back to the days of Chandragupta Maurya in India, or even further beyond that, when Fayan came to India, the Chinese traveler. He documents how organized the streets were. Even you look at Harappa, Mohenjo-daro, they were so organized. I'm not sure whether that is communicating the state of the culture or the result of the culture, or it is just the state of current administration and we are trying to interpret it in this way.
Well, have you heard of a city called Chandigarh?
Yes, I've been there.
Very well designed. It doesn't include poor people. The plans were made for middle class and upper middle class people, not for poor people who have nothing. The presupposition is you own something in order to build this land. You can't do that in cities like Bombay. People will come, they come because they have nothing. And because they have nothing, they cannot stay in houses, they'll stay in slums. And they contribute to the city. What do you do to them? Throw them out? You are the head of Bombay, decide. Are you willing to kick them out? Because the moment you kick them out, 2 things will happen. They will not have employment, and a major source of infrastructure in India will die in that area. They tried this in BKC too. They made wonderful cities. Nobody wants to open an office there because there's nothing for the poor. Because planning presupposed the rich will have come in cars. What about people who don't have cars? So they made buses, but the buses don't go to the station from where the poor come. So nobody wants to work in BKC. So suddenly you don't have staff. the bosses come, but there's no staff because they don't want to come and work in a place where there's no transport. And the coffee is available only in canteens, which cost $50, when on the road I can get it for 5 rupees. It's illegal. You know the cutting chai? You know it's illegal across India. Because the only way it can cost rupees 5 is if you pay for not a single license. I cannot promote illegal things. And yet we love that cutting chai and how cheap it is. The students can afford it. At a technical level, it's illegal. So if the administration enforces every law, yes, we will have a wonderful road. Lots of people will be excluded. Which really means that you will not be elected the next time. These are real challenges. I'm giving you real challenges. Because I work with a lot of politicians and I work with a lot of...
Yeah, I don't want to hog the time. I could challenge this saying, are you trying to justify the state of the matter to stay like this, or is it just an outcome of the years and years, or maybe last 200, 300 years of misgovernance there? I'm just trying to isolate the effect of misgovernance. I agree today, this is the situation, you got to be inclusive. I'm just trying to isolate, are you trying to say this is cultural, embedded into Indian mythology, or is it just the byproduct?
There is a right way, but I'm saying this is okay. You see this as something amiss. You begin with this is a problem, right? That's your assumption. Problem hai. So you've begun with problematizing an observation. That's how you begin. You began by saying it's a problem. So all traditional cities in India become a problem because they're not built for cars. They were built for carts. But they're still cities in India. They were built 500, 800 years ago. Narrow streets. Old Delhi was built before there were cars. Vasant Kunj in the 1970s, the houses built in Delhi were built in the assumption that at best people will own a scooter. Two-wheelers. So there are no garages. So now every house has 2 cars and they're parking it on the main road. Because there's no place to park. Because the cities were built in the socialist era with the assumption that nobody will buy a car. They were not fools, the people who designed the city, they were very good architects. They couldn't imagine the possibility that one day India will be liberalized and people will have cars and buying Mercedes. They said scooter. So you see the houses across Vasant Vihar in Delhi, and you people from Delhi, just go there and you'll see the roads. And why are they crowded? Is it misgovernance? It was appropriate governance in the 1970s. But in the 1990s, it's a mess. Because nobody visualized the society will change so much, so dramatically.
Yeah, taking this discussion a little bit forward, staying in India, and given the infrastructure we have right now, so what is the optimum column for you? Or which direction should we?
Go forward and backward. For whom is the column being designed is the question. So if I go to Reliance Knowledge City, the Ambani's Knowledge City, you enter it, it is a 5-star facility. You walk in and everything is out there in the press of a button. You get a card, you can access the best in the world. There are helicopter pads, there are flights, there are planes, but it's a private little patch. It is not India, it is the private space of that organization. You go to the Microsoft office in Hyderabad, it's huge. It's not India, it's another planet. It keeps a whole bunch of people out. But the moment I step out on the main road, I see a very different India. I see the whole of India occupying that space. From the poorest to the richest. That's also India, this is also India. So you'll have private spaces which are highly organized, which can exclude a whole bunch of people. That is very organized. But places which cannot afford to exclude will never be like that.
But do you see, what is the way forward?
I don't see this as a problem. Again,
No, I'm not saying this is a problem, but what is optimum?
This. For them it is optimum. They are not in a hurry to reach at 10:30 for like.
Just getting a thought.
It's okay. People will wait. So I've been in Big Bazaar and the boss says 9 o'clock the meeting and people don't arrive till 10 o'clock. He's not upset. He doesn't lose his temper. He's fine. So I work with people for whom not coming on time is not a sin. It's okay. But if you work with people for whom if you don't come on time, it's like the end of the world. Then don't stay here, please. You're in serious trouble. So in India, I always check with the person before an appointment. I'm leaving my house now. Is the appointment still on? I don't do that in America. Because I assume everybody's going to be there. Because the whole system exists to support me to come on time. Doesn't exist here. So you adjust, you change. Should every corner of the world be like this?
No, I'm totally agree with your point. I'm not saying this versus this. I'm just saying what is the best way of utilizing
Across India.
So are you, maybe the tussle is between when you say optimum, maybe optimum usage of time is what you're looking, optimum usage of resources?
Optimum usage of time, resources, optimum usage to develop, optimum
Sure,
usage to
but
progress.
one way of looking at it is optimum way of including everybody.
Yeah.
Now that is a different way of optimization. Now the question is, what is the priority of at that point of time, maybe for that place? If it is actually in front of airport, that doesn't sound the right way to do it as such. But maybe a different place, a market, maybe it's fine.
No, I totally understand. These are different.
That's a good way of putting it, in fact. Which measuring scale are you using?
Yeah.
Which is optimum based on
What context you are talking about.
That I think it makes a huge, huge difference. Yes.
You talked about at the end, leadership is the ability to include all these different columns, but it comes at a price.
Yeah.
And so what advice do you give to people about either mitigating that price or how you actually work in that?
It basically I'm saying is that be ready to pay a price. That's what leadership is all about. Because sometimes you are willing to pay the price and sometimes you're not. So in India, many people are not willing to pay the price. In other parts of the world, they are willing to pay the price. So I'll give you an example. You're the head of a mining company. You have access to iron ore, very good quality ore. But the land on which this ore exists is by people who are tribals, who have been living there for the last 700 years. And you go to them and say, I will compensate you. And they say, but we don't want compensation. We have been living